have a body. I am a body. Just think about that for a moment. I think most of us might say, I have a body, I have a brain, I have a mind. But is our language being a bit misleading? Doesn't this imply that there's something else, an essential me, pushing the buttons and pulling the levers in my brain? Or am I my brain? But what if I suffer brain damage or lose my mind through old age? Are my mind and my brain the same thing? Or what if I swap brains with someone else? Who am I then? Am I him? Or is he me? And what about my soul? Where does that fit in? Well, I'm thoroughly confused and I haven't even started yet. So, sit back, grab a cuppa, make notes if you wish to, and come with me as we try to make sense of the relationship between body, mind, and soul, and ask, am I more than just my physical body? When we talk about body, we know what we mean. It's relatively straightforward, right? We can talk about it, analyse it, measure it, test it. We can record what happens in the body and collect data. Our brain is part of our body, and so when it comes to brain activity, we know quite a lot, through the wonders of modern science, about how the brain works. We can measure brain waves. We can observe brain activity. We can identify different parts of the brain and know the functions they perform. We know that the limbic system controls our emotions, while the amygdala stores memories. The human brain is phenomenally complex. A piece of human brain the size of a grain of sand has about 100,000 neurons, and one neuron has between 1 and 10,000 synapses. The processes in the brain are so complex. It's continually changing its output, its physiology, its structure, in response to the continual feedback between sensory experiences of the external world and then correlating that with our past experiences. Our big brains are a remarkable product of the evolutionary process. The human brain is the most sophisticated piece of technology known to man, and to a hard materialist like Richard Dawkins, that is all that I am. I am my amazing, remarkable, extraordinary brain. He says there is no spirit-driven life force. Dawkins argues that everything about us is physical. Drawing an analogy to a supercomputer, he says that we are just bytes and bytes of digital information. The materialist position, while it may seem a bit bleak, reducing us to just a series of electrical impulses in the brain, is actually anything but bleak. In his book, Unweaving the Rainbow, Dawkins points out that just because we can explain what causes a rainbow doesn't make it any less beautiful. Believing that we're highly evolved animals doesn't detract from how amazing we are. Our consciousness, our ability to think, imagine, and create is a product of our big brains. And the fact that we have evolved to a stage where we're able to comprehend and discover the meaning of life, for Dawkins, shows that we have human dignity. Now, while artificial intelligence continues to become more and more sophisticated, scientists are still a long way off replicating the human brain. And while some people draw analogies between the brain and a computer, most neurosurgeons consider these to be inadequate. It fails to recognise the sheer immensity, the incredible marvellousness of the human brain, because if there's one thing a computer lacks, regardless of how super it is, it's a mind. So, what do we mean by mind? I know you're hoping for a definition here. It's always useful to have a natty definition stored away to roll out when needed. But the thing is, it's quite difficult to define what we mean by the mind. We're able to contemplate, to think, to sit here and question what we mean by the mind. We're also able to create, invent, inspire, imagine, to go beyond our immediate situation and bring forth new ideas. But where do these come from? Most of the brain's information processing happens at the unconscious level. Only certain events rise to the surface of our minds. So, is my ability to think just an illusion, and the mechanisms giving rise to my conscious thought are buried deep within the unconscious? It's a rather unnerving idea and poses serious questions about our free will. What we can do is draw a distinction between physical states and mental states. Physical states are those which are easy to identify, things like eye colour or brain activity, which we can look at, analyse, measure, test and observe. Mental states are no less real, but they can't be observed or measured. Things like feelings, memories, thoughts. But unlike physical states, these can't be analysed. We can't open up the brain and observe the way something feels for the individual. So when you listen to a piece of music, we can talk about the music in terms of the sensory and neural processes that are happening in your eardrums and your brain. But what about the way you experience the music? The way it makes you feel? The memories it evokes, the pictures it brings to mind? These feels are called qualia, and we can't measure them. They're subjective, they're specific to the individual. The way you experience a piece of music will be quite different from the way I experience it, even if we're sat side by side. As humans, we are conscious or aware of ourselves and our experiences. Our stream of consciousness starts when we wake up in the morning and stops when we go to sleep. The problem comes in explaining how something intangible and immaterial, like our consciousness, can have an impact on the physical world. And there are countless examples of the ways in which our mental states, the way we feel, can manifest itself physically in the body. For example, feeling anxious can raise your heartbeat and quicken your breathing. Likewise, practicing meditation or mindfulness can help to alleviate those physical states. When I think about wanting a cup of tea, this causes my arm to extend towards my cup. So is my internal, mental, feeling, thinking self distinct from my physical body? Is consciousness an emergent product generated by our complex brain? Or am I more than just my physical self? Do we, as humans, have something intrinsically different which elevates us above other animals? A soul, the essence of being, which enables us to distinguish between right and wrong, to have apparently unevolutionary traits like generosity, empathy or compassion, which for some religious believers, a special something which enables us to live on beyond our physical death. Again, difficulties arise when we talk about whether humans have a soul because it means such different things to different people. In Christianity and Judaism, the soul and the body are one. They are different aspects of the same thing. Although even within Christianity there are different ideas about the nature of the relationship. In Hinduism, the soul is the real you, the eternal you, encased inside the temporary shell of the body, which is cast off at death and passed on to the next life. However, it's not only religious believers who claim to have a soul. Non-believers often use the idea of a soul to talk about the special, unique essence of a person too. The various ideas that we're going to look at today will vary in their coherence. That is, the extent to which you think they make sense or how convincing you find them, due to your own personal beliefs. So, as you listen, see if you can identify which appeals to you more than any of the others. If we go back to the ancient Greeks, we realise that these questions are ones which have been pondered for millennia. Plato was a dualist. This means he thought the person was made up of two separate entities. The body, which he saw as being physical and temporary, imperfect and changeable, and the soul, immortal, perfect, unchanging. Plato's views on the soul developed over the course of his life, and we find reference to it in various different works. In his dialogue, The Phaedrus, Plato uses the voice of Socrates to explain what he sees as the relationship between the body and the soul. Plato sees the soul as distinguishing the animate from the inanimate. It is what gives it life. Through Socrates, he says, what is it that, when present in a body, makes it living? A soul. Now, according to Plato, the soul originates in the realm of forms and is temporarily attached to a body. When you die, the soul is free for a short time before being entrapped once again in another body, where through bodily experiences and sensations, it remembers the truths of the forms. For Plato, the soul is the real you. It's your inner self or psyche, your thoughts, emotions, hopes and desires. And it's made up of 3 parts: reason, emotion and appetite. Plato believed it is your soul which guides your body through life, with each part of the soul playing an important role. However, of all the living things which possess a soul, it's only humans which possess reason. The relationship between the different elements of this tripartite soul is illustrated through Plato's analogy of a charioteer steering 2 horses. One horse is beautiful, noble and white, with graceful wings trying to fly up to heaven. This represents emotion. It's spirited and impassioned. It loves honour, courage, victory. The other horse is black and shaggy, and it has tattered wings, wanting to drag the chariot back to earth. This is appetite. It's our physical urges, pleasures and comforts. The charioteer is reason, allowing us to gain knowledge and distinguish right from wrong. The charioteer is aiming for heaven, the realm of forms where it can contemplate essences of things like beauty, wisdom, courage, justice and goodness. Now, Plato's view of the relationship between body and soul stands in contrast to those of Aristotle. Aristotle was a monist. He rejected Plato's metaphysics and instead he focused on what we can understand of the natural world. He saw the soul as inseparable from the body. So when Aristotle talks of the soul, he means something entirely different from Plato. For Aristotle, the term soul is to do with form. Everything in the natural world is made up of both matter, that is, stuff, and form. It's specification. So matter without form is just lumps of stuff. If you've come across Aristotle in ethics, particularly in virtue ethics, you'll know that for Aristotle, something is good if it perfectly fulfills what it's supposed to do. So a good knife is a sharp knife, because that means it can cut extremely well. So the form, its specification, of a knife is its shiny sharpness, just as the form of a volcano is its exploding molten laviness. So your soul, that is your form, is your you-ness, your blueprint for existence. It's the pattern which your matter will follow throughout the changes which might occur to your physical body, from baby to toddler to adolescent through to adult. Your form, that is your soul, remains the same even though your physical body changes, despite there being no separation between the two. According to Aristotle, different forms of life have different kinds of soul, and the more complex the life form, the more sophisticated the soul. All living things, both plant and animal, possess and are animated by a nutritive soul, which drives all living creatures to feed themselves and reproduce. Animals have perceptive souls, which are able to experience the world around them using senses, and they have enough intelligence to distinguish between pain and pleasure. However, humans have the most sophisticated soul because they also have rational thought, the ability to reason and to identify right from wrong. The human soul is the accumulation of all 3 types of soul: the nutritive soul, common to plants and animals, the sensible, that is relating to the senses, shared by all animals including humans, and also the rational soul, possessed only by human beings. So unlike Plato, Aristotle believed the soul was not a separate entity. It's not immortal, and therefore it cannot survive death. Understanding these two very different ideas about the soul and the relationship between body and soul is essential in navigating the centuries of debate which followed. Dualists, they are the people who believe the soul is separate to the body, who believe that we are more than just physical, will be following the path set out by Plato. Monists and materialists, on the other hand, will deny there's a separate entity. They will argue that the physical is all that there is, and any discussion of the soul being separate to the body is just a category mistake, an error of language. They are following the Aristotelian line. René Descartes, the 17th century French philosopher, was a dualist, like Plato. According to Descartes, our rational thinking mind is separate to our bodies. Descartes used a philosophical thought process known as skepticism or radical doubt to arrive at certain truths. He said it's possible to doubt everything our senses reveal to us. He used the example of a stick in a glass of water. The stick appears to bend, but this is just an illusion. If we can be fooled by a mirage in the desert or by thinking the sun goes round the earth, then just how many of my other experiences might actually be false? Descartes considers that instead of being sat in a chair by the fire, he may instead be dreaming. In fact, perhaps his entire existence is a dream, and our sensory experiences are the result of an evil demon forcing images into our minds. It is out of this quagmire of doubt that Descartes arrives at one absolute certainty. I am thinking. In wondering whether I'm dreaming, I'm thinking. The very process of doubt involves thinking. Therefore, Descartes could be certain of one thing. So long as I am thinking, I can be certain of my existence. In other words, there must be an I doing the doubting. Cartesian skepticism, or his evil demon idea, has been given a modern twist by philosophers like Hilary Putnam, who presented the idea of the brain in a vat. This is a thought experiment which asks us to identify how we would know for sure that we really are experiencing the world. We're not just brains floating in a tub of nutrients wired up to some supercomputer. Now, the conclusion that Descartes reached, his cogito ergo sum, is so important it led to a whole area of philosophical thought known as Cartesian Dualism, and it continues to influence many modern philosophers in their search for the answer to what makes me me. According to Descartes, my thinking mind is the defining element of my existence. I am a thing that thinks. Descartes' process of radical doubt leads to the conclusion that my personal identity is inextricably linked to my thinking mind. I am a succession of momentary thoughts. As long as I engage in thinking, I exist. In Descartes' view, it's my mind which is the essential me, and can be conceived of as entirely independent from the physical body. So even if my physical body undergoes radical transformation, my mind can remain the same, and I remain the same person. Now, if we accept that this is true, it paves the way for a meaningful discussion about the possibility of a disembodied life after death. Descartes' dualism is known as substance dualism. The mind is an immaterial substance which is distinct or separate from the physical body, and it remains a very popular way of understanding the nature of who we are. Perhaps it correlates with how we feel about our experiences. I do genuinely feel like there is a me making decisions and controlling the signals my brain sends out. Some people may also look to accounts of near-death or out-of-body experiences as evidence that there's something more than just my physical body. There are fascinating accounts of people recalling their own brain surgery, as if they'd been watching the whole thing from somewhere near the ceiling. However, before we take that as strong evidence for substance dualism, we'd have to be confident that their out-of-body experience was genuine and couldn't be explained in natural terms. substance dualism has faced a number of criticisms. It's clear that the mind and body interact, whereby physical events cause mental events and vice versa. My desire to drink causes my hand to stretch out towards the cup of tea. Standing on a piece of Lego causes me to feel pain. It's a basic scientific principle that physical actions require physical causes. And by stating that mind and body are two separate substances, a problem arises. How do they interact? Descartes was pressed on this issue by his pupil, Nicolas Malebranche. How could an immaterial, thinking mind interact with a physical body? Descartes' solution was to point to a teeny tiny part of the brain, right in the middle, the most inaccessible part, called the pineal gland, and say this was the point at which the mind and body interacted. This interaction enabled the mind to cause events in the body and the body to cause events in the mind. However, this was essentially impossible to test, and theories which can't be proven empirically are not likely to be accepted by certain people, especially logical positivists. Even Descartes admitted that he'd failed to give an adequate explanation of how the mind and body interact. Malebranche suggested that maybe it's God. Maybe God intervenes. On every occasion where mental and physical events conjoin, such as me feeling hungry and thinking about what to eat, God would act to make something happen, creating the illusion of cause and effect. It was a doctrine known as occasionalism, and it really didn't win very much support. Perhaps the most famous criticism of substance dualism came from the 20th century British philosopher Gilbert Ryle, who in his 1949 book The Concept of Mind accused substance dualists of talking about the soul or the mind as if there was a ghost in the machine. By this, he's seeking to ridicule the idea that there's something extra rather than just the physical. He said that the language used to talk about the mind or the soul is misleading and can cause people to make a category mistake. He used the example of a foreigner watching a game of cricket. He can see the batsman and the bowler, the umpire, the scorers and all the other members of the team, but he still asks, where's the team spirit? As if the team spirit is something identifiably extra. Ryle goes on to talk about a man buying some gloves. He might say he's bought a left-hand glove and a right-hand glove, but he wouldn't say, I bought one left-hand glove, one right-hand glove, and a pair of gloves. So to talk about mental processes as being different from or extra to physical processes, for Ryle, is a mistake. Now, another solution to the problem of interaction was that of property dualism, put forward by the Dutch philosopher Spinoza. He claimed that mental and physical are two different properties or characteristics of the same thing. So our minds are not separate to our brains, but rather our brains are able to perform two different functions, physical ones like moving and mental ones like thinking. Property dualism is often called soft materialism. It is still materialism because it claims that the only substances are physical ones. There's nothing extra, as the substance dualists claim that there is. Soft materialists believe that our mind or our consciousness is more than just a brain process, and the mind and the body are related. They can't be separated, and the mind certainly can't exist without the body or the brain. However, there is more to us than just the purely physical. And this is seen in the way in which the body often displays inner emotions. For example, a physical symptom such as sleep deprivation can result from something troubling the mind. The word psychosomatic means mind, psyche, and body, soma. A psychosomatic disorder is a disease which affects both the body and the mind, like how stress might manifest itself as an outbreak of dermatitis or gastrointestinal issues. Quite often, a psychosomatic disorder is treated through both drugs to treat the body and behaviour therapy to treat the mind. One argument which supports property dualism is called the philosophical zombies argument, put forward by the Australian philosopher David Chalmers. In his 1995 article, Facing Up to the Problem of Consciousness, he asks, why is it when our cognitive systems engage in visual and auditory information processing, we have visual or auditory experience? The quality of deep blue, the sensation of middle sea. Why should physical processing give rise to such a rich inner life at all? The fact that we do have such a rich inner life, these subjective experiences or qualia, which I talked about earlier, which can't be analysed or tested or observed by anyone, suggests that our consciousness is more than just our synapses firing in our brain. Chalmers uses the analogy of zombies to illustrate this. A zombie is physically identical to a normal human being, including the brain, but completely lacks conscious experience, like it's dead on the inside. It doesn't have any subjective experiences, doesn't experience the feeling of heartbreak or that uplifting feeling brought on by a particular piece of music. So how is it that an actual person does have subjective experiences? What is it that creates the difference between a philosophical zombie and an actual person? In other words, why are we not zombies? According to Chalmers, the fact that we're not zombies, that we do have these inner subjective experiences, is evidence to support property dualism. The idea that our consciousness makes us more than just the physical, even if our consciousness can't actually be separated from our physical brain. Both Frank Jackson, in his 1982 paper What Mary Didn't Know, and Thomas Nagel, in his 1974 article What's It Like to Be a Bat, argued that our subjective experiences are central to our consciousness. We can gather data, measure, analyse and observe all kinds of physical properties of things. However, none of this will show us what things feel like to the individual. These qualia, these subjective feels that cannot be measured or analysed, that are unique to different people, show that there must be more to our consciousness than the physical brain impulses which fire when we hear music or watch the sunrise or see the colour red. We can never know what it's like to be a bat because we will never know what it feels like to use echolocation, even if we spend a lifetime watching them. So, I am a body. I have a body. Which is it? The jury is still out on whether our mind is something extra, as Nagel, Chalmers and Jackson argue it is. Dawkins and Ryle, of course, would say it's false to presume that it is. Our mind is our brain, and our consciousness is just neurons firing. A separate mind is just an illusion, and the mechanisms giving rise to my conscious thought are buried deep within the subconscious. For religious believers, the answer to the question of the relationship between body and soul is no more straightforward. Even within Christianity, you'll find both monist and dualist beliefs. But whatever the answer is, it holds the key to so many other big questions in philosophy, questions about the nature of human beings, personal identity, the possibility of an afterlife, and what possible form it could take. We've covered a lot in this episode, and as I said at the start, the extent to which you think these different ideas make sense, or how coherent you find them, will largely be due to your own personal beliefs. The most important thing, though, is to recognise the key characteristics of each approach: dualism, monism, hard materialism, and soft materialism or property dualism. On the AlevelREblog, you'll find some summary notes to accompany this episode, which should help you get all this straight in your mind. Or your brain. Wait, isn't that the same thing? If you'd like to explore these ideas further, then I'd recommend listening to 2 episodes from the BBC's In Our Time collection. one on the mind-body problem and another on consciousness. In addition, the guys on the Panpsycast podcast chat in some depth about many of the ideas I've talked about today, so that could be well worth a listen too. See you next time.